So you may have noticed that this is a segmented run, and what I mean by that is that I save in between every chapter so I can replay it over and over and get footage that I'm satisfied with. And the main reason I do that is because I suck and I miss inputs all the time, but I also do it because there's RNG in this run sometimes, and I might not have a choice but to reset. And this game has far less luck in it than you expect of a strategy RPG, but there is some sparse in and out, and it does affect us. And this chapter in particular, chapter 5, is probably easily the second worst chapter when it comes to RNG. And I'll talk more about that when we get into the chapter, but for right now we're in the preparations menu, and what you just saw me do was I took a bunch of Flitter Dance cards, which suck, and I combined them to make a slightly less sucky version called the Monarch Dance. And we need to do that because we're going to take a lot of damage in this chapter, and we're going to need to keep Yamato as healthy as possible. And also threw in a Neptune Horn and Grass Hopping, which we got in chapter 3, and I'll talk about those when we get into the map. Now I'm in the hangar, and I'm building our first set of upgrades. So I built the Power Bumper, which is a small upgrade to Yamato's weapon, and I also built him a Balancer, and Shoya a Balancer, and Yui an Antenna. And what those two things do is they say they increase accuracy, but the damage calculation in this game actually just takes the power of your weapons and whatnot and just multiplies it straight up by your accuracy. So when we buy things for accuracy, we're actually buying them for just a straight up damage increase. And you can actually miss this game. I'm going to talk about that right now, but I don't actually know if accuracy affects literal accuracy. It's kind of weird and hard to test, just as an aside. But to get into why this chapter sucks and I hate it, I first have to explain the difference between defending and evading. So I mentioned a long time ago that when you're attacked, you can reduce damage by defending or evading, and what defense does is it looks at your defense and barrier stat and it just doubles it for that combat. And what you might be able to infer from that is that the more defense and barrier you have just to start with, the more you get out of defending because you have more to increase. But if you don't have a lot of defense, you want to evade instead, and that's usually used by high speed units. And what it does is it looks at your speed and uses it to make an RNG roll, and sometimes it does nothing. Most of the time it'll reduce the damage or a random amount, or it might just make the attack miss completely. And as you might guess, when the enemy starts to do that, it's bad for us because suddenly we have just this dice roll to beat. And it's going to happen a couple times in this chapter, starting at the very start of our next turn. So to explain what's going on in this chapter, actually, we beat Alicia and she's running away, and she sends her subordinate unit to come fight us. And that unit is made up of Raphael, Janie, and Blade, and they pilot a Mantis, Honeybee, and Pillbug, respectively. And we're going to fight Raphael right now, and he's kind of like the Rhino Beetle, but has way less defense and more speed. So he's going to try and evade when we attack him at the start of our next turn. And basically that means that there's a chance that we might not do enough damage to kill him, and there's also a chance that we might just miss completely, which sucks. It's going to come up later too when we fight Blade, which is odd because the Pillbug is the biggest, tankiest piece of shit in this game. He has more HP defense than he knows what to do with, but he's still going to evade against us because there is a secondary defensive stat in this game called Barrier, and units that have a whole lot of defense usually have really bad barrier, and Blade's got nothing. And we're going to attack him with Yui, and if you remember, Yui has ass lasers, and that's not insignificant. It's actually a special brand of weapon called a beam weapon, and you'll see more of those as we get to the late game. But what they do is they don't attack defense, they attack a barrier, sort of like magic, I guess. And so when we attack a Blade with this beam weapon, he's going to look at his shitty barrier and say, I don't want to double that number, it sucks. So he's going to evade, and we have to do this fun stuff again where we might just miss. We're going to fight Blade here in a second. He's such a tanky douche nozzle. We have to use Hornet Fury, which is bad enough as it is, and then we have to shoot him with Yui and maybe miss, and then we have to use Bee Sting on him, which is all of our good resources at this point that don't involve Yamato. It's such a pain in the ass. I hate this chapter, man. But there's one other unit that I haven't talked about, and that's Janie. She's piloting a Honeybee, which is actually a higher speed unit than the Mantis is, and it's actually got pretty good defense and HP too, so you're probably going to expect that to be even harder to kill than, or maybe not harder, but more frustrating to kill than Raphael was. And you'd be right normally, bees are a pain in the ass, but the thing is, if you're counterattacking, the enemy can't evade. So that's what we're gonna do. We can afford to take 2 attacks from Janie, so we're just gonna counter her twice and kill her. And by and large, that's how we want to deal with all kinds of high-speed units. It's just counter, and they can't do anything about it. Also, this random beetle's also gonna try and evade, but he has a really bad chance of doing so. And so will that stag beetle that we fought like turn 2. He's gonna evade there too, and maybe miss. Not usually though, thankfully. And there's one more aspect of speed that pisses me off, and that is sometimes there's just like this passive damage reduction that happens if you have high enough speed. And you'll actually see it in this chapter, and I've literally never seen it happen in this chapter before. Basically what happens is, like, sometimes you'll just have the damage reduced, and very occasionally it means the difference between life and death for a unit. And if we fuck up that dice roll, we'd have to restart, and it pisses me off. But as you're going to see here, I use Neptune Horn, and what Neptune Horn does is it just straight up doubles your melee damage if you win the minigame. If you don't win the minigame, it decreases it by half, so you only get 50% increase. But I double my melee damage and then kill this butterfly, but he just doesn't die because he's an asshole. It ends up not actually costing us any turns though, because we just barely can't kill this mosquito, which is another reason why I find this map frustrating, because we're so close to a 4-turn completion and we just don't get it. And I've tried so hard, but if there are any improvements to make to this run, this would definitely be where I would start, because I swear to God it's possible. And I guess to close with, the other card that I brought into this chapter was Grass Hopping, and you're gonna see me use that basically like several times every chapter from here on out. And what it does, as you might have seen, is you basically use it on an adjacent ally, and you pick them up, and you throw them 3 squares in any direction. And we're gonna use that all the damn time, mostly because it's a more efficient way to approach the enemy. Like, it gives us basically more movement overall. But we can also use it for stuff like jumping walls, and yeah, like I said, we're gonna use it all the fucking time. So hopefully you're not gonna get tired of that small animation that plays.